Hi, welcome back again to the Ivory Tower Collections. Let's talk about this right here. Today I have something cool to show you. It's for the Atari Lynx. And specifically, it is basically an SD cartridge full of ROM files, and that you can load additional ROM files to for playing on your Atari Lynx. Let's talk about this thing a little bit in more detail. The SD cartridge comes in this cool little 3D printed case, and I've seen them in different colors. Mine came in this blue that you see here, and it slides on with a lid here. This is like a double printed or a two-color printed 3D case. Very nice. Inside we have a printed off listing of all of the different games loaded onto the SD card, and they have numbers next to them, and that becomes important a little bit later on. I'll explain. And here is the cartridge itself. It's called the AgaCart. I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, and I do apologize. It's actually made by Rafal Jankowski out of Poland. And it's really cool. So, in addition to coming in this case, I'll just show you the cartridge itself. Let me see if my camera will focus in a little closer on it. So, on the back of the AgaCart, it's also in a 3D printed case, as you can see here. And yeah, there's some fine lines showing up down here from where it's been used in my Lynx a few times here. But it's all perfectly smooth. You'll notice some segments up here at the top, upper left. Those are LED segments that will light up with numbers. Also notice two sets of buttons over here on the left and on the right. So these are used for switching between the different banks, or the number banks that store the games on them. So already you kind of have a hint on how this works. If you're familiar with my other video I made with my Roland MT200 sound module and sequencer, where I installed a GoTech floppy drive emulator, well, that's basically how the AgaCart works. It has a micro SD slot there on the side that all the games are contained in, and each game is basically stored in its own numbered directory. And those same numbers match up with the numbers that were on the sheet of paper you saw a little while ago. So basically the way it works is when you insert it into your Lynx, you're going to use the buttons on the back side to choose between the number bank you want that will contain the ROM program you want to run on your Lynx. The button on the right will increase the digits by 1, and the button on the left will increase in increments of 10. So obviously if you hit this button on the left once, it'll go 10, 20, 30, 40, etc. And the button on the right will increment by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then rotates back again. Let's see how it works. I will be using my Lynx 2, which I modified about 2 years ago with the McWill LCD kit, just so it's a little easier to see things on it. The AgaCart is just a hair bit thicker than a normal Lynx cartridge, but not too much. I've actually got some homebrews that are actually on thicker PCBs. So, the AgaCart will just insert into the Lynx just like any other normal game. Just like that. You can see that once it's in place, it's pretty much lines up flush, just like any other normal Lynx game would. So there's two modes of operation that the AgaCart operates on. By default, it's actually going to be in operation number 2 mode. Now, what happens in operation 2 mode is that when you power on the Lynx, it's going to ask you to insert game. Now, normally on a Lynx Model 2, you don't normally see this message because the Lynx Model 2 doesn't normally power on if there isn't a game inserted, so you don't normally see that message. This message was common if you powered on the Lynx Model 1. But in any event, in this particular case, it says insert game, and that's not too far from the truth of what it's asking us to do. That's because at this point, the AgaCart is waiting for us to select a number bank that corresponds to the program we want to load. So let's take a look real quick and load up something fairly simple. Let's see, how about number 31, which happens to be Joust. So I'm going to go over here to the back. Again, here's my buttons, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the first button on the right so that the segment changes to a 1. And then I'm going to push the left button until I have a 3, and now it says 31. And now the letter P is showing because it's now reprogramming the AgaCart with the game Joust. And what will happen is it'll reset the Lynx and the Lynx will restart. There we are, Joust, ready to go. Cool. I'm going to power it off and I'm going to choose a different game this time, real quick. So again, I'm going to power it on. It's going to ask me to insert game because the AgaCart is waiting for me to make a selection. And this time I will choose Xenophobe, which happens to be in file number 69. Wait a second, it starts to do the reprogram. Set the Lynx down. And it will restart. And there's Xenophobe. So what's the other mode? Well, the other mode, which is actually mode 1, is allows the AgaCart to basically automatically load the last game you played. In reality, the AgaCart is memorizing the last game you played all the time, because you'll see something interesting. Although I power it on and it asks me to insert a game, you'll notice that as soon as I push any button back here, it starts with 6-9. That was the last game I loaded, which was Xenophobe. So it's always keeping track of that. The other mode, when I switch the AgaCart into it, will actually load up Xenophobe automatically when I switch that on, or whatever the last game was that you happen to play. So let me show you how you change the different modes on the AgaCart. Now it's a little tricky because you have to turn it on while also holding a button or a combination of buttons on the back. So you have to push both the left and right buttons as you power on the Lynx. And when you do that, you'll get what I call the ants, which is just the little lines that roll around. Now, what it does first is it's telling you that it's basically in memory loading mode. There's also like a memory configuration load mode. By default, it's in 0, which allows for faster loading of the ROM files or program files to the cartridge. But if you prefer to have a more reliable, absolute, surefire, no chance of anything going wrong, then you can change it from 0 to 1. And what that will do is the AgaCart will basically do a verification on the ROM image before it loads it up. It just delays it maybe another second or two. And to simply change that option, you just have to use the right button to switch between the 0 and 1. Once you have it on the option that you want to set it to, then you push the right button to configure it. Now it had a 3 and then it goes to 2. This is actually the startup operation mode configuration for the AgaCart. And again, I told you that it has 2 modes, a mode 1 and a mode 2, and by default it starts off in mode 2. That's what it's showing us here. I'm going to go ahead and switch it to mode 1 and then push the left button to save the settings. Now the letter P is going into program mode because what's going to happen is it's probably going to automatically start up Xenophobe again. Again, that was the last game I played, and there it is. So now when I power off the Lynx and power it back on, it'll say insert game, but it immediately starts programming the cartridge for Xenophobe. See? Okay. So again, to go through that process, I'm going to hold down both the buttons on the back of the cartridge as I power on the Lynx. I'll get the little ant status indicators. I'm going to go ahead and hit the left button to go to the startup option 3. It's in mode 1. I'm going to change it back to mode 2 and save it. And now it's going to just stay on insert game. I actually prefer to use it on the normal mode where it's waiting for me to choose a game instead of always loading up the last ROM, because that may not necessarily be the one I want to play. I might want to load up something else instead, and this gives me a chance to more easily do that. There's also a third option on the AgaCart. This is a pretty cool feature, and that is that the cartridge features the ability to have loaded presets. Yeah, it's got 9 banks or 9 separate selections within the cartridge where you can store a game to a particular number. So let's say you've got, your top, 5 games that you like to play on the Lynx. You could load those into numbers 1 through 5, and it doesn't replace the numbers that you have on the sheet or that you may have loaded in the different directories. It's a whole separate set of memory banks that just quickly loads up the location of a particular game you want to fire up. So instead of having to type in 69 or remembering that Xenophobe happens to be game 69, or Zybot, that's game number 70 for instance, instead of having to remember all of that, all you would need to do is just to load it into a selected preset from 1 through 9, and then you can just select that preset to quickly load the game. So let me show you how you load the preset games first. It doesn't matter what mode or startup mode, 1 or 2, the Lynx is in. What you do is you hold down the right button as you power on the Lynx. Let me get my orientation right. You'll see the little startup ants indicator again, and it says 1 and 3. Now the 3 indicates that we are currently in game preset 3. Now I'm just going to go over here to preset 1. When you hit the left button, it's going to program the AgaCart to load up with whatever is currently in preset 1, which I think is probably the game APB. We'll see. Yes, APB. That's because by default, all of the presets are loaded with the game APB in them. But let's say I don't want APB. What if I want Xenophobe as my first game? Or let's choose something. Let's choose Zybots, which is a completely different game. Well, I'll show you how that works. It's pretty easy now that I know how. So once you have the game loaded, or a game is loaded, keep in mind we were currently in select bank number 1, or preset number 1. Here's all we have to do to load Zybots. All I'm going to start doing is pressing the numbers until we get to number 70. Leave it for a second, and what will happen is it will usually pause and essentially freeze the game that's currently in play. If I then turn off the Lynx and then turn the Lynx back on while holding the right button again, we will see that we are now in preset 1, just like we were before. If I hit the left button on this, what do you think is going to happen? Well, you'll recall that it loaded the game APB last time because that's what was in preset or preset number 1. But let's see if it happens to remember what I just did, because in theory, it should have loaded Zybots now into preset 1 when I selected 70 earlier. I do believe that's the game Zybots. So from this point on, anytime I start the Lynx up and I use preset 1 first, it's now going to automatically load the game Zybots instead of me having to search for it. As long as I remember that Zybots is in position 1, I can use that. But again, this is different from selecting the game, because I just turned the Lynx off and back on. It's telling me to insert game. It's probably going to remember that I left off on 70, and it does. But obviously I can load up a different game. So what I'm going to do right now is go all the way to number 1, because number 1 is actually the game APB. But again, the presets are a different area of memory that's storing information versus the actual numbered banks themselves that the ROMs are contained in on the SD card. So there we are. The game APB is loaded. So overall, what do I think of the AgaCart? Well, I'm really pleased with it. You know, it did take a little bit of working with it to kind of figure out how the little presets work, and occasionally I still run into a slight minor issue where I'll accidentally overwrite something I have in a preset, or it almost looks like a new game that I load up actually took over the last preset, moving the other games down the list. It's interesting, but at least the feature's there, and perhaps with some more revisions or something, because Rafal is still supporting this, obviously. Also, it was very reasonably priced, especially for what you get. I mean, you're already getting the SD card. It's preloaded with pretty much every ROM, at least of the time of this video, with pretty much every ROM that's available publicly for the Lynx. He even includes a micro to standard SD adapter, just in case you don't have a way to easily read the contents of a micro SD. I actually happen to have a micro SD reader in my PC for that, but it's good to have it. And the overall box, that everything comes in, this 3D printed box, along with the cartridge. Even the cartridge is 3D printed. It's just amazing. It really is. And it's really good quality as well. I've been very impressed with this. And the price was really quite amazing when you think about it. In my case, it was right at about $70 shipped, or as some people like to say, $70 delivered. And it only took like maybe about 2 weeks, I guess, from the time that I ordered and paid for it to arrive, because, you know, I had to go through US Customs and all that fun stuff as well. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for an easy to use and a nice SD flash cart solution for your Atari Lynx, I highly recommend the AgaCart. I mean, it hits all the right points that it needs to hit for the purpose of something like this, and it's very easy to use, and it's in a very elegant, nice little package and very reasonably priced. To order one, I'll put a link to the forum in the video description on where to order this, but essentially it's just a matter of going out to Atari Age and sending a PM to Rafal, letting him know that you want to order one, and he'll put you on the list, and he'll give you the details with payment and etc. So yeah, really cool piece of hardware, the Atari Lynx AgaCart from Rafal Jankowski.